Sex is the number 2 taboo in the world. Like death is number 1. The question is so simple, and I don't know if I can express the profundity of it. What have I been taught to believe about sexuality? And when you really let that question drop into your being, the answers will just start to come through. And the follow-on question is that I don't actually believe. You know?
Yeah.
I want you to have wonderful orgasms. I want us all to have
Tanya.
wonderful orgasms, but
it's
thank you very much. What's much more interesting to me is what is your relationship, what's my relationship to this unbelievably powerful force which moves within me. I'm not so interested in the act of sex. That's an afterthought almost. Our sexuality is an energetic force, and it can go in a lot of different directions. And sex is one way which we express our sexuality.
Okay. Yeah.
It's an expression of it. There's a lot of different expressions of this force. In 2010, I had the wonderful good fortune of having my marriage fall apart.
Fortune.
Good fortune. Like tremendous good fortune for both of us. Like we were really committed to making it work and trying for so many years. There was like a massive crumbling. And out of that, out of the ashes of that, I remember looking at my heartscape at one point and just being like, it's like a torched horizon. Like there was just no life showing in my heart. And to come from this like kind of burial ground almost and start to pull the pieces of myself together, and I had this one tiny hope, like this one tiny question, which was like, I wonder how big I am. Like I wonder how tall I am when I actually stand up, when I'm not being like crushed by this.
Yeah.
And it was that combined with the recognition, like there is no forever. There's no forever. The only thing that I know that I'm in relationship with for forever is myself. Like from birth till death, the only person that I know is there is me. So I better get good with me.
Harvest is in London for a special one-day event. Here we gather renowned artists, speakers and practitioners who are all inspiring us with their take on this edition's theme, Tools for Transformation. I hope you enjoy this interview. Today I have the pleasure of chatting with Tanya Kazeminy, a teacher and love and connection coach. With over 2 decades of experience, Tanya has been sharing her wisdom on love, spirituality, and sexuality. She's truly passionate about 2 things: fostering unconditional self-love and guiding us on a journey of sexual evolution. In 2019, she even published GASP, Sexual Healing, and her mission takes her across the globe to spread her transformative work. I'll show you maybe later some beautiful pages, if they're allowed, non-censored, on the internet. So let's dive into the world of love and sexual wisdom as we explore Tanya's incredible journey, and also we'll save some practical question maybe for later during the interview. Hello, Tanya.
Hi.
And thank you so much for being here for Harvest in London.
I'm super excited to be here. Like so excited to be here.
That's amazing. Okay, so let's start with this concept of sex evolution. Can you explain what does it mean for you?
Sexual evolution is really about how do we attend to this dimension of ourself. I think that anybody who's listening to this podcast or who's coming to Harvest, you're tremendously focused on your evolution as a person, and there's so many different ways that we can grow and focus on our evolution. But actually, our sexuality is a space that we don't really focus on that much. It's a place that we think about a lot. Like we think about sex all the time, but we don't actually give it a lot of contemplation. Like really expand ourselves into it and really wonder, why do I think what I think, or where are my limits at? Why do I hold judgment around these things? Why do I believe these things? How do I come into a different relationship with this force that lives within me?
So do you think like we think we're that way and we keep it like for life usually, and we're not trying to question our sexuality?
I think I notice that I almost feel like people get stuck in the time when they became sexual.
Yeah.
Like is at the time when they kind of initiated into sexuality, they're kind of, if it isn't considered, there's a lot of people who they're in a fixed state at that point, which is always really interesting to me. So it's like, this is how it is, and it's not. Yeah. It's not at all.
So what are the tools to have an evolution, a sex evolution?
I think the biggest tool that you need is curiosity. And why another thing about sexual evolution that I think is really interesting is that it's kind of at the center of us, you know, like it's a big part of our the way that we operate, the way that we navigate in the world. We might not recognize that it's to do with our sexuality, but so many of our decisions are made around our sexuality. So when we actually start to apply curiosity, like non-judgmental thinking in the space, we start to open up our world in every direction. It's like we're working from the center outwards, rather than a lot of our evolution, we're working from the outside towards us. Like when we're working with a therapist, we're kind of dealing with this situation and how it's affected me, looking backwards. But somehow with our sexuality, it's like we're working from the very center and moving outwards.
Do you have an example of a decision we would make and for you would be linked to sexuality, and for another person who's not thinking or not aware of this wouldn't at all relate that to sexuality?
I mean, I can think of really big ones. Like, you know, like you married your husband based on this decision, like this chemistry which lives within you, and then that affects your life in so many ways. But actually, at the very initial point, the initial thing of this long relationship and all the different dimensions that it holds, in the very beginning, it was about attraction. I think that a lot of the decisions we make around jobs, where we live, how we dress, these are all kind of obvious as I say them, but
job is not that obvious.
I think a lot of our decisions around money are really connected to sexuality as well.
Oh, okay, how that?
Again, I'm gonna make it kind of obvious, but maybe it's not something that everybody thinks about. Like, for men, the job that they're making is like, how do I make enough money that I'm attracted to the woman that I want to be attracted to? Like, how do I make enough money that I make sure that my sexuality is fulfilled? And for women, it's really about the decisions that we would make about a job would be like, am I going to be on my own? Am I going to be with someone else? Like, how do I need to finance my life, and what shape do I want my life to be? So it's a little bit, we're out in the outer territory of what I kind of am attending to, but it's just this force that lives inside of us is so powerful that it really affects every different dimension of our lives.
And what's the ultimate goal of a sexual evolution?
I think the ultimate goal of any of this is our freedom, you know, like I think that anyone that is in the space of spirituality, sexuality, like we're attending to our healing in this way, I think we're looking to be true to who we are. We're wondering, like, who am I really, and how do I be that in the most consistent way in all dimensions of my life? So sexual evolution is a part of that, like really coming to the truth of ourselves.
So what are the good questions that we don't think about that you advise people to ask to themselves?
I think the most profound starting point, you and I had a conversation before this, and you were saying to me, like, what's the connection between self-love and
we're gonna.
And so, do you want to go into that later?
Yeah. No, we can go now. Yeah,
I think that with sexuality, it's such a powerful force that in many ways, self-love comes before. You were saying to me, what comes before self-love or sexuality? Yeah. And I think that there's a lot of ways that we need to be able to steady ourselves before we really go into the space, so that we understand how to care for ourselves. So the self-love dimension comes into it in a really big way before we really venture into the exploration of our sexuality. The way that I see sexuality, I'm not so interested in in the act of sex. That's
Yeah.
that's an afterthought almost. Like that's like our sexuality is an energetic force, and it can go in a lot of different directions. And sex is one way which we express our sexuality.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah.
It's an expression of it. There's a lot of different expressions of this force. So I want you to have wonderful orgasms. I want us all to have
Thank you,
wonderful
Tanya.
orgasms. But
Wish you the
it's
same.
thank you very much. But it's kind of an after the fact. I think what's much more interesting to me is what is our relationship? What is your relationship? What's my relationship to this unbelievably powerful force which moves within me? And how do I move with it rather than be like pummeled by it, or like in resistance to it, or rejection to it, or grabbing at it, attracting to it? Like, how do I come into a peaceful relationship with it?
I think that's very unique, because usually the sex coach will give you like tips about the act itself, maybe before, or maybe what you think, but I find it very interesting to focus on before, the thinking what sex represents for everybody, and that's what you're working on now.
Yeah, that's really, as I see it, our sexuality, like, this is such sacred ground. It's such sacred ground. And it's been so badly treated. I don't know anyone who hasn't had trauma within their sexual. I know very, very few women, friends of mine, who haven't been abused. I'm hearing so many abuse stories from men. In any room, most of the people that are in there have experienced some act of non-consensual violent sex against them. Like, so when you start with that, it's like we need to come into different relationship, like healing from the very beginning. Like, how do we come into another relationship with this energy before even we move into the space of how do I get to awesome orgasm? Awesome orgasm is super, super important, and it definitely follows. But this, like, how do I be with my nervous system in this space? How do I be honest with myself? How do I come to trust myself? How do I love myself in this space? How do I remove judgment? And I think you said, what's the question?
To ask yourself,
Yeah, it's. I think the question is so simple, and I don't know if I can express the profundity of it, but the question is really like, what have I been taught to believe about sexuality? What have I been taught to believe about sexuality? And when you really let that question drop into your being, it's the answers will just start to come through, and there's different areas that you can focus on.
Yeah.
But what have I been taught to believe about sexuality, about my sexuality? And the follow-on question is that I don't actually believe. You know?
Yeah.
Because sex is the number 2 taboo in the world. Like, death is number 1.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, fair enough?
Yeah.
Sex is number 2. So we're not talking about it. We're talking about it in a way of like, in a very disconnected way. And so it's like this kind of, I don't know, sex has been dissolved into this like act of tremendous friction. And this, like, we have all these notions about it. Porn has figured so much into it. The way that we're living life now, especially with all the apps and, the current climate is even more exaggerated in the disconnection in the act of sex.
Yeah.
And to really allow love into that space, because that's where love lives. Love lives within sexuality. That's like this, it's within this force. And so how do we really start to remove judgment around this, free up open up our mind, our bodies, our souls, our hearts to new possibility? And I don't mean like new positions. I mean like new, like, presence. Like, how do we be more present with ourselves? How do we be more present with pleasure? How do we be more aware of these deep indoctrinations we've received about shame?
Yeah. Because I understand also that it's a taboo because it's difficult for a parent. I find it like very difficult to talk about sex with the children. You don't really know at what age you can talk to them about this. When you have the discussion with your parents, it's always like a bit awkward. At school also, they just tell you, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. And you have the movies, and it's always too much, and not always healthy, because healthy is not so interesting in movies, so you make it like also awkward. So it's very difficult to have a healthy education about sexuality. Don't you think?
Yeah, I do. I definitely do. I always, I'm the mother of 2 sons, and I think I offer a lot of parenting advice along the way. Like, people are always asking me stuff like about parenting. And I just think that the most important way that we can teach our kids is to be a lived example of it. And the more comfortable you are within yourself, not that you have to walk around and demonstrate, it's not that, but like when you are easy in your skin with this topic, they feel it.
Okay.
It loses its edge because it's lost its edge for you. And I feel like that in any dimension of parenting, like really, like the most beautiful gift you can possibly offer your children as a mother is your own liberation. Yeah. That you've committed energetically to freeing yourself and being the most profound, giant, wonderful, blossoming rose that you can possibly be. And your kids have just learned from that, And the same, I think, within the space of sexuality, it's really like, are you comfortable with it?
Yourself, because you're talking about self-liberation. Tell me whatever you can, whatever you want to share, but did you feel you had a moment in your life where you self-liberated yourself?
Yeah. I mean, my life was, in 2010, I had the wonderful good fortune of having my marriage fall apart. Good fortune, like tremendous good fortune for both of us. Like, we were really committed to making it work and trying for so many years. And there was like a massive crumbling. And out of that, like really, like out of the ashes of that and the ashes of, like, I remember looking at my heartscape at one point and just being like, it's like a torched horizon. Like, there was just no life showing in my heart. And to come from this like kind of burial ground almost and start to pull the pieces of myself together, and I had this one tiny hope, like this one tiny question, which was like, I wonder how big I am. Like, I wonder how tall I am when I actually stand up, when I'm not being like crushed by this.
Yeah.
And it was that combined with a recognition, like, there is no forever. There's no forever. The only thing that I know that I'm in relationship with for forever is myself. Like, from birth till death, the only person that I know is there is me. So I better get good with me.
So you started at this time to work on yourself.
Absolutely.
Right. And on which level? On everything? Or on your spirituality first? On self-development? On sexuality?
It started with. It went right into spirituality. I had an amazing energy coach. Like, he was an energy healer, and he became like my coach and my therapist. It was like having Buddha as your therapist. So for 2 years, I would go and see this man, and we'd talk about life, and he would just transmit these amazing principles to me. And I learned so much from him and his enlightenment. Like, to me, he's a fully enlightened being.
Okay. And then did you love yourself as much, or did you learn how to love yourself?
I'm still in the process. There's not like a finish line for these things. There never is.
Yeah, it's evolution.
And it's this thing about, like, I'm always telling people, there's no rush. Like, you're not late. Don't worry. There's nowhere to get to. Like, it's just whenever you start, you start. Like, don't beat yourself up about how long you haven't been on this path. You know. But yeah, that was the beginning of it, and it was. It was a long road, man. It was a really long road. Like, I really was like, I started out on my belly. And through that, and I got really, really involved in yoga. I learned, did all my teacher training in yoga. I learned to teach meditation. And then somewhere in the middle of all that, I had this like total download to create GASP. And it was in 2011, and I got this like download to create this book, and I was like, no, I'm not going to do this book. Like I got, you get these ideas and you just get completely obsessed by an idea. So for 2 weeks, I was like obsessed with this idea. And I was like, okay, I can pull together all these different people, and we can do this, and we can do that, like this whole thing. And then I just got like, no, absolutely not. Like, I'm a mother of two kids. Like, no.
You were scared about the reputation.
For sure. And like, I'm a conservative person. My father's Muslim. Like, I cannot write a book of erotica. That's a ridiculous thing to do.
Yeah. So just to tell you about the book, because you sent it to me before the interview kindly. It's like super soft, and the images are beautiful, and it's different text written by anonymous person. And so how did you choose them, and which text did you write? What did you want to do in this book?
The book had its own plan. Honestly, I was just hanging on to the back of the like speedboat of the book. But it's been written by 20 different writers, and there's men and there's women, there's 2 transgender writers, there's a legalized sex worker from Australia, there's open relationships, marriage, single. It's just a whole chocolate box of intimacy. And everybody had the brief to write about sex that was so good that it was tattooed on their soul.
Wow.
And the point of the book it's like the antithesis to disconnection. Like, the book is just about inspiring connected sex.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that's what you're trying to, when you do your classes, that's what you're trying to teach to people, like how to connect with each other.
The book has a different project to me, actually. Like, the book is much more about like the act of sex.
Oh yeah, okay.
And my teachings are much more about the force of sexuality and really like coming into peaceful relationship with ourselves. It's funny. It has
complementary.
Yeah, it's complementary.
And you didn't write everything, so that's why it's logical in a way. That you want this to have you want people to have this on their bedside table.
Exactly.
That's what you said.
Exactly, and that it's something that you can read to each other, or you can read by yourself. It's actually it's like a book of healing, but it doesn't feel like it. It's a book that you don't want to put down. Like, I wanted it to be delicious. I wanted it to be something where like you're reading it and you're like you got ideas, you got new understandings. It created different inspiration for you, but it didn't feel like one of those like, you've got to drink your green juice.
Yeah.
There's enough of that in the world.
Yeah, it's like options.
Exactly.
Yeah. After teaching for 20 years and being, how has your perspective of self-love and intimacy evolve throughout your teachings?
I think it evolves because it's evolved tremendously because my relationship to self-love and intimacy has evolved. Yeah. I believe that for me, I teach from a place of embodiment. Like, I'm not teaching about things that I've read that I'm not living, So as I grow, so too do my teachings grow. And it's funny, it feels like every 6 months you need to almost start over, because the growth is so fast right now. Are you feeling that in yourself?
Yeah.
Like, I feel like, whoa, I almost don't recognize myself from 6 months ago. And again, like, whoa. So
it depends on the period in your time, in your life, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I understand this.
But yeah, I think the unconditionality has come into it, where before self-love was, it was almost something that you'd be a little bit embarrassed to mention, like, I'm working on self-love.
Yeah.
Like, people, that's, and now I really understand its worth. I could see that it was I could see its importance. I could feel its importance in my body when I think about it or talk about it, but actually, it was so separate to me from where I was, and now I'm so much more in that space, and I really recognize that my relationship to myself, however much I love myself, is how much love I have access to in the world. So the amount, like, however I limit how much I love myself it's like turning the tap of the water down really, really low. I can't get much water through the tap. And the more that I open myself out into loving myself, and the more that I become non-judgmental of myself, the more I become unconditional of myself, the more forgiving I become of myself, the more amused I am by my weirdness. It's like I just have a completely different relationship to love in all dimensions. And that is so beautiful. So beautiful.
And what are the most frequent societal beliefs that prevent people from loving yourself when you meet your clients?
I think that it's interesting because these places are so powerful, right? Like if we were to actually understand the truth and the beauty of who we are, if we were actually to recognize how truly lovable we are and that we actually just are love, we would be unmanageable. You know, like we would be unmanageable. Like we wouldn't comply with stupid rules. It wouldn't make sense to us. I'd be like, why would I do that to myself? That doesn't make any sense. So these places where freedom really lives, self-love is a place where freedom really lives. Our sexuality is a place where freedom really lives. And so those our connection to those spaces have to be limited so that we're kind of manageable.
Yeah. In a world where people are married and couples and everything, are you suggesting like it would be the end of marriage if we all listen to ourselves?
No, but I think that there'd be a lot of things that the management, like the managing paradigm under which we're living, there would be a lot of things that we'd be asked to do that we wouldn't do. There'd be a lot of ways that we live our life currently that they just wouldn't make sense. Like,
do you have an example?
Yeah. Today I put all my stuff in storage in London. So I go get my stuff out of storage today, like to get some suitcases out. And I go into this like bunker, like down in the like whatever marble arch, like down 1,000,000 floors. And there's this man sitting there and he's completely pale and so sweet. And he takes me to show me my box, and while we're talking, and I'm like, how is it? Like I was like, what's this job like? Do you love your job? Like, is it interesting people, whatever, having a chat with him. And he says like, well, and I was like, it must be weird to be underground. And he goes, well, in the beginning it was strange because I used to get a lot of headaches, but now I've just gotten used to it. And I just thought, if you really love yourself, you wouldn't put yourself in a situation where you could feel it was so bad for you.
Yeah, that your body's
right.
Unhappy.
Yeah, you wouldn't tolerate that level of self-abuse. I mean, I'm being dramatic, but in a way, like, you wouldn't tolerate it. You would if you had to in your kids and your family, and like that was the only job, but you wouldn't as a young dude without a lot of pressure. You would say, no, I want more for myself. No. Yeah. I feel that I deserve more. I wouldn't put myself in that position.
What are the new models for conscious couples for you, and or healthy relationships, like different? Do you have like other models instead, of course, if you listen to yourself?
I was listening to a podcast yesterday with Martha Beck and Elizabeth Gilbert. I don't know if you know those two.
Okay, yeah.
And they were just saying, like, basically, as soon as a woman gets married, right off the bat, she takes 10 years off of her lifespan. Yeah. And as soon as a man gets married, he puts 10 years on. and I was like, whoa, that is a crazy model for us to all jump into. I think that I'm watching my niece get engaged, or like people around me getting engaged, and how I feel is, enjoy it while you enjoy it, but don't lock yourself into forever. Like as important marriage vows and the commitment to each other is also the commitment to each other's happiness. And at any point where we no longer make each other happy, let's set each other free. So to start to build that in, like, statistically, the statistics are 50% higher than 50%. So why can't we just work that into, like, I want us to be the couple that makes it, but within our vows, let's give ourselves the freedom that it doesn't hold this tremendous, like, failure, this concept of failure. I think I would really, I think that's a really interesting thing to remove from
Have you experienced like guilt with your children, or no? Or
Yeah, guilt.
Yeah.
But I'm really trying to shake off guilt. Guilt is a super big waste of time. And that is just like, it's such a massive manipulation tool and I'm so prey to that. I fall so easily towards that, but I'm really trying to eradicate both guilt and sugar from my life. I'm doing better with guilt than with sugar, but what are these substances? What are these toxic substances? Guilt is definitely one of them. Like, I don't want it anymore.
And do you think guilt has an impact on the sexuality of people?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
It's a crucial element.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Shame is I think shame is one of the biggest ones.
How do you remove them? So you have a positive thought. Do you have like something like via meditation? Do you have tools?
I think that it's a slow and steady process. Like I think a lot of in sexuality there's a lot around. I think boundaries are like I teach a class about boundaries, and the way that I break it down is really like how do we apply boundaries in order to free ourselves from the dimensions of shame and guilt.
Very interested
and
about
not to free us. It's this thing about steps, right? Like there is no like this question that I said, like what have I been taught to believe about sexuality, which is such a profound question.
Yeah.
And if you were to ask that question on a regular basis, like washing the dishes, just I think there's a way that when we ask certain questions with our whole heart, with really like in a very genuine way, there's a part of us that knows that we're truly asking and the answers start to come towards us.
Yeah.
So what do I believe about sexuality? What have I been taught to believe about sexuality? Like I've been asking that question for the past 7 years and I'm still next answer, next answer, next answer. It's so layered. These things are so layered, and we're in the process of. I remember hearing this thing like we like the conditioning or whatever with these judgments, these things that we've been taught to believe is like putting on a glove, and then we've been taught to believe something else. We put on another glove, and we've been taught to believe something else. We keep putting on gloves, and then we wonder why we can't feel.
Yeah,
we've forgotten that we're wearing like all these gloves. Why can't I feel this table? Why can't I feel? So it's this just like it's the celebration of every layer that we remove, and it's the celebration of the expansion of feeling every time. And some are bigger than others, but like it is just like one glove at a time, just one layer at a time, and every time we expand, and then you almost need to adjust to the new influx of energy, emotion, and sensation, and then you can do it again, and you can do it again. But if you did it all at once, it would be unbearable. It would be unbearable.
Right. Tanya, you were talking about the energy inside you, the sexual energy. Can you describe exactly what is it? It's not orgasm.
No, I'm almost talking at a biological level, like that every single cell in our body is looking to replicate. Like there's this giant force of perpetuate the species.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, okay.
And this huge force is our sexuality, our sexual energy. For me, it's our central energetic artery. Like it's the thing which drives us the hardest, the fastest, the furthest, the most. Like it's just this giant force. And I feel like the way that society relates to this force. Furthermore, like I would take it into the space of saying, for me, the more I understand it, it's like it's a direct connection to source. Like it comes from earth, it shoots out into sky, like it is the thing which connects me to everything that I am and that is.
Okay, and you can experience this without having sex. Someone not having sex can experience this force.
I think in the realm of sex, actually in the act of sex, is a super interesting place to play around with it. Like that's when it's most activated, and you can channel it and direct it and make it like narrow the force down so it's like much more contained rather than a flowing force which moves through you.
Okay. Tanya, we said we would ask some little practical questions at the end of the interview. First question, when you struggle with intimacy, what's your advice to people?
I think that it's really important to have a relationship with yourself. Self-practice. It's just, I'm a huge advocate for self-practice. I really, I hear so much from men and women, the pressure that we're putting on each other to be the answer to who knows how to unlock this key. Do you have the key? Do you have the key? Do you have the key? Like, who's got the key to this door? You have the key to the door.
Okay.
And if you can't, if you don't know how to pleasure yourself, if you don't understand how your own pleasure works, it's really hard to hand that over to somebody else. And I think it's just a beautiful place to expand our relationship to the intensity of pleasure, because that's intense.
How do you start? You start to do that every day, or you book like an appointment with yourself?
I think it depends on what your life looks like. I think there's something really beautiful about like the super simple act of saying good morning beautiful to yourself when you wake up, and good night beautiful to yourself. Like that, like
twice a day.
Twice a day.
Okay.
Twice a day. I want a good morning and a good night beautiful. But just this thing where you start to relate to yourself, and you start to think about in the same way that if you were to, to be making love with your husband, that process probably started at least 24 hours beforehand. Same with you, like just the simple things, like how does it feel? Like, how do I rub my lotion on my hands and make it feel nice? Okay. How do I do these things where I'm like celebrating the pleasure of touch? It doesn't have to be like, go right there. It's like, how do you work these things in? Breast massage, like stroking, hugging, self-soothing, but just that you address yourself with a quality of sensuality.
Yeah. Do you have some practical exercises or some technique to help individuals to feel more their energy when they're having an intimate relationship with someone else? To pay more attention.
Yeah. I think that it's super simple. Again, whenever you feel that you've left your body, return to your body. Whenever you feel like the practice is just like, how do I feel in my body right now? How do I feel in my body right now? How do I feel in my body right now? Because how you bring yourself to presence is by being with your body. And again, like it's so common to push past our own limits, push past our own pleasure, push past ourselves in any situation. And then you're constantly returning, how do I feel in my body right now? I think that's a beautiful question to ask. It's also a beautiful question to ask the other person.
The other one, okay.
How do you feel in your body right now? And then you he gives you the words, and then you say, could you ask me too?
Okay, interesting.
And then the other person would ask you, and you would offer the words in the way that you want to, and in that way you're starting to create a language of pleasure, which is a really why we have such bad communication.
That's an amazing one, because it's intimidating. Also, we can read everywhere on Instagram or on books, like you need to express your needs, but it can be intimidating, right?
Like how do you? It's hard to do that right off the bat. So like
you start with a feeling.
In a kind of a date situation, like when you're texting somebody, you're planning a date, like, and you can be like, oh hey, by the way, how do you feel in your body right now? Like when we're talking about this, how does this make you feel? And you're already starting the level of communication without it. And he might be like kind of excited. You're like, yeah, I've got butterflies in my tummy, and that's the start.
Yeah.
And then you go on, and you can, like throughout the meal, you're asking. At the point where you kiss, you're asking. And each time, you're giving the other person the gift of returning to their body, and you're getting the gift of returning to the body, your body. So you're always checking in with your internal experience, and you're giving it validation. You're giving it validity. Like if your internal experience is like, you know what, I am feeling nothing.
Yeah, can happen.
Yeah. It can happen. It happens a lot. Or I'm feeling a big fat no. Or I'm not vibing this. Like fine. Like at least you know.
Yeah. Interesting. For a couple who doesn't have sexual relationship anymore, or very low desire, what does it say about the relationship? And how to find this?
You could say a lot of different things about the relationship. it could say a lot. I think there's like a million different reasons why that might happen. It might be that trust has been lost. It might be that communication has been lost. It might be that someone's in a hormonal imbalance. It might be that it's a year of non-interest before something else. It might be a transition between what was into what is. There's so many different reasons for it. I think that there's something really powerful about communicating within that space, and because again, it's like the taboo. Like, it's so hard to actually talk about it. Like, truly, what do you feel when you look at me? Like, truly, tell me these. Like, let's get super honest in this space. And I think only through like really kind of gut-wrenching honesty is the way through. And you don't know where you're going to get to. You know, you don't know what's on the other side, but I really believe that we're taught not to be honest. We're taught to just like honeycoat this, like wrap this up in cotton wool. His ego's so fragile, her confidence is so fragile, like all this fragility, when actually, you know, it's sort of better to know than to not know.
Yeah. How can you reconcile, because I think it's also important and it concerns a lot of people, with the parts of your body that you don't like, sometimes even you hate?
Good morning, beautiful. Good night, beautiful. Like,
to your whole body or to the part?
Specifically on those parts.
Yeah.
I think there's something about the gratitude of it. Like, so whatever, maybe it's your boobs, you don't like, you know, you have a thing about those and you're like embarrassed or you're shy or whatever, you start to think about like everything that they've given you through the years. You know, you really start to pay attention. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You start to pay attention to remembering all the different dimensions of them, you know, like, oh, I remember when they fed my children. I remember when he touched them like this. I remember when they did this. I remember when I like lifted up my top at a concert. Like, you just run through, give them the spectrum of history, or whatever the piece of your body is. You give it the spectrum. Oh, my stomach doesn't look the way that it used to. Okay, but yeah, but it held children and did these things. Like, I don't know, I feel like there's so much gratitude even in my elbow. Like, my elbow has done so much for me. Like, if I want to let me be grateful, and a lot of times gratitude's the way through a lot of these kind of ego issues, right?
Yeah. It's the last question of this interview, the question I'm going to ask to all the guests. Tanya, what is your favorite tool to actively transform our society or our planet or ourselves?
Ooh, you could have prepared me for that one.
I thought I did.
My favorite tool is to, personally, I'm completely in service to love. And my question is always like, how would love show up here? What would love look like here? What would love do or say here? Like, what is the most loving act that I can offer here? It might not be the most loving act, you know, on the scale of things, but like, what is the most love that I can offer to this situation? And I really truly believe that we're in an epic battle of love versus fear. And the more that we can do to create more love in ourselves, to communicate more love, to be more loving, like to represent love more strongly, we're going to win. We're going to win. I think in some ways we already have.
Thank you, Tanya, for giving the love during this interview, and thanks for being at Harvest in London.
I'm super happy to be here. Thank you so much, and super nice to see you.
Thanks, Tanya.